Wonderful. I am so excited to record this trailing workshop. This is the pre-recording of the workshop that we're going to be giving in July for the Craze Train Club. So if you're seeing this before then, congratulations, you're so special. No, I'm really excited. So let's jump right in. What is trailing? Trailing is training your dog to follow a trail of human odor to source, which is the human that laid the trail. And we ask our dogs to do this in many different contexts, on a lot of different surfaces, and it can look like a lot of different things. So on the slide, I have pictures of a dog air scenting and a dog using ground odor. And we're going to talk a lot more about that today. But I want to give you a visual for what it could look like. Now, historically, trailing dogs, or just dogs in general, have been used to find lost people for a long, long time. In terms of the documented history that we have, in the 17th century, monks would use St. Bernards to find lost travelers in the Alps. In the 18th century, dogs were trained to track escaped criminals and slaves. In the 19th century, we saw the adoption of bloodhounds by police forces and tracking criminals. By the 20th century, trailing dogs were utilized by search and rescue teams worldwide. And today, man trailing, which is what we do, is a popular sport. It's a recreational activity. So that's what we are doing today. Now, what is it that we are training our dogs to follow? So there's three main things that we're training them to follow. They are crushed vegetation or ground disturbance. That is, imagine the smell of freshly mowed grass. It is that, but on a micro level. So when you take steps, if you walk through grass, if you tear a little branch, you are making small damages to grass or vegetation or leaves or branches, and that produces odor. Even if you're just rubbing it or pressing it, it's going to produce odor. We have contact odor. That is when you touch something, when you step on something, you specifically leave a print of yourself on that item. No matter what surface it is, it's going to hold a little bit of your contact odor. And then we have blown human odor. So when you are shedding all of the scent, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in a minute, it gets dropped on the ground beneath you. But assuming that you're outside or that you're in a building with ventilation, it's also getting pushed around by the air and by the wind. So it gets blown to different places and caught. So we ask our dogs to move seamlessly between all three of these. And we're going to talk a little bit about how they do that. Now, when we talk about what trailing is, we also have to talk about what trailing is not. There are three main categories of finding lost people that I want you to be familiar with. They are tracking, air scenting, and trailing. Tracking uses contact and crushed vegetation odor to follow at an uber precise level, footprint for footprint, where the person has gone. And we ask our dogs to do really sharp turns, go exactly where the person went, and really, we want them to go quickly, but kind of take their time doing it very precisely. Air scenting typically uses blown odor to air scent to capture where the person is based on odor that is coming at them in the air that's not quite landed on the ground yet. Air scenting is very useful for search and rescue. So if we know a person's out there in the woods, but we don't know where, we don't have a starting point, maybe we don't even have an article that smells like them, we can still send an air scenting dog to bracket back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until they catch odor, and then they follow the scent cone into source and they can find that person for us. Tracking, it's most frequently used in sport. So if you're going to compete in finding lost people, that's probably what you're going to be doing, is tracking. And it is used in law enforcement a fair bit as well. Now, trailing is a combination of tracking and air scenting. We, like we talked about just a moment before, ask our dogs to move seamlessly between contact odor, crushed vegetation odor, and blown odor. I find that it is very useful for both search and rescue when we do know where the person started, we just don't know where they are now, and in law enforcement, same situation. It is also much more efficient than tracking would be. So in trailing, if our dog has the skill set to follow the track, but let's say our trail goes like this, right? And the person is here now. If we have the tracking dog, they're going to go like this and get to the person. But if we have a trailing dog, they might start this way, but go, hey, wait, they're over there, and then cross over. So in most cases, I will say, I find that trailing is significantly more efficient than tracking would be. So it's much quicker. A couple of other notable differences to keep in mind. In trailing and air scenting, there has to be a person at the end of the trail. Otherwise, there is no end of the trail, right? So like in tracking, for example, especially if you're training for sport and you're aging your tracks out a long time, you might even lay your own track. So you start the dog and they're following odor, but the odor that they're following is yours. In trailing and air scenting, we want our dog to get to source, to get all the way to the person. So it wouldn't make sense to lay your own trail, because if you have a good dog, they should turn right around and be like, hey, you're right there. Problem solved. We did that. So we have to have a person out there for trailing and air scenting. In tracking and trailing, we also use what's called articles. These are scented objects that smell like the source person, the trail layer, the trail runner. So when we start our trails, we very well may have an article that smells like that person that has been dropped somewhere. The dog should locate that and then use that odor to identify the trail that they need to follow and get to the person that smells like that item. We can also train our dogs to find lost items along the way. So if, let's say we have a criminal that throws a weapon as they're, running into the woods, we can have our dog following that trail of the person, but then say, hey, wait, there's an item over here. Come over, collect that evidence, and then get back on the trail and continue on. So they're very useful. Images here we see on the left, we have a really nice picture of a good track. That blue line is where the person has gone. The red line is where the dog has gone to follow the person. It's a really nice track. The one on the right, it is specifically talking about coning plumes, but I think it's a good representation of air scenting. Our dog bracketing back and forth until they catch odor and then working it in to source. So I have a little video here that I want to show you from the Scandinavian Working Dog Institute. This is in Ova. And the moment here, you're doing some hyper precise tracking, very literally footprint for footprint. Watch her flip back and forth from where this guy has walked. This is amazing and impressive, and the dog is brilliant. And this is not what we are training. We want our dogs to be more efficient than that. So let's talk about odor. I hope you're so excited to nerd out, because odor is like one of my favorite topics. Now, we shed about 40,000 rafts or scurf of skin per minute. So I like the term raft because I think of it as like a little dead skin cell boat that's just sort of floating along in the wind, and it carries all of the things that make you, your bacteria, fungus, parasites, sweat, hormones, enzymes. It's gas and it's dead skin cells that falls off of you, and you shed about 40,000 of them per minute, which means they are quite literally everywhere, and everywhere you go you're leaving a little cloud of it behind, kind of like Pigpen. But that's not all. It also is made distinct by who you are as a person, your age, your race, your gender, your diet, what you put in your body, like food and medications and drugs, and what you put on your body, like soap and deodorant, perfumes and shampoo, all of that kind of stuff. So this is how our dogs are able to scent discriminate. Even if we have a lost person that's gone out in the woods and people have gone looking for them and they've contaminated our search area, and we have an article that smells like them, great. Our dog can take that article and say that's where the person went, even though there's human odor everywhere. This specific person's human odor went that way. And this is how our dogs can do that, by telling the difference and discriminating between what one person smells like to another. We all have a unique odor, just like fingerprints. Now, there's no way for us to be dogs and understand everything about odor, but we do have some good ideas of how odor is affected by the environment. At least we can read it a little bit off of our dogs. And it's important to understand this. I think understanding odor and reading body language are the two most important things that you can do to be a good teammate to your dog and support them when you are on a trail together. So let's go through these just a little bit. All environmental conditions affect odor. Time is a big one. If you lay a trail and it sits for 10 minutes, it's going to be super fresh. A lot of the odor is still going to be right there. It's still producing. It's still very new, very clean. Probably hasn't been contaminated much yet. Versus if you lay a trail and then it sits for 3 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours, it's going to start dissipating. It's going to spread. It's going to become splotchy. It's probably going to get contaminated. It's probably going to get blown to new places. Time changes the quality of our trail significantly, and it's hugely important to practice different aged trails. We also have temperature. On a warm, sunny day, our odor is going to dissipate a lot faster than on a shady day or a little bit of a cooler day. So temperature is going to affect that quite a bit. Wind changes how much our odor spreads. So if we have a super still day, the odor is going to stay fairly close to where the person walked along the track. If it's windy, like we talked about, odor is heavier than air, but it's pretty light. So it's going to get blown away and pushed into other things where it's likely to get caught, like vegetation and brush. Think about, on a really cold winter day when there's that frost dust blowing across the road, it's like that. Or on a fall day, think about where the leaves are going to get caught. That's where our odor is going to get caught too. Humidity. Yeah. If it is really dry, our odor is not going to produce nearly as much as if we have humidity. We love a nice cool morning when it's still dewy on the grass. The odor is going to fall and just produce more odor. So, and like, a light rain, beautiful. It's not to say that our dogs can't trail in the desert or on a hot, sunny day. They absolutely can. We know that odor still gets produced in those contexts, but it's not going to be as productive. So we have to support our dogs by by allowing them to navigate the trail in the best way that they can, which frequently means leaving the track for a productive area where the odor is more likely to be. Contamination is important to understand too. And this kind of goes right along with time. Even if first of all, everything produces odor. So even if you walk through a clean field, it's contaminated. But it also depends on if other things are going through your search area before your dog actually gets to run the trail. So if you lay your trail and then maybe you're working cross trails, you have somebody lay a trail that goes across it, or maybe animals go by, maybe a flock of birds flies through. Like all of that is going to impact how your dog interprets the odor that's on the ground. And then we have surface. Some surfaces catch odor better than others. Think about that frost dust again, blowing across the road. It's not going to get caught on concrete. It's going to get caught on the curb where all the grass is and the vegetation. Um, those weird little alleys where all the leaves get stuck, that's where the odor is going to be. Some surfaces will hold odor better than others, and that's called productive area. So we want to help our dogs utilize productive area to solve problems faster. This is a cool video. This helps us understand a little bit of how humans, how human odor leaves us. So this is the Schlieren human thermal plume. Basically, when you're hot, heat is going to come up off of you, cool off, and fall away from you. Check out the way she's breathing. Oh, it's so cool. So I think the odor is going to leave us in a lot of the same ways. It's going to travel up, cool down, and fall off, which is why your track, footprint for footprint for footprint, while productive, might not be where the majority of the odor is. The majority of the odor is probably going to be like 8 feet away, if not more, assuming that you have wind. So there's a lot to consider about the way the odor moves. And here's just one more visual for you. We have a box that's producing odor. So with no wind, it's going to create a dome, right? A semicircle around the object. But as soon as you have wind, that odor gets picked up and moved away. And the stronger the wind, the more it's going to spread out, the further it's going to go, the wider the scent cone. And what you'll see, I like this visual here of a dog searching for a scent cone. We can see them traveling towards it. They hit the edge of it and then bracket back and forth until they get into source. Now I have one more visualizer for you, and this is from The Tao of Trailing by Jeff Shetler. Cor Oldenburg and Cor Oldenburg Jr. have a great little excerpt in here about just appreciating how challenging of a task we are training our dogs to complete. So, for example, this is the path that my dog should follow. It's really quite clear in black and white. It's an organized font with no distractions. There's no reason why our dog couldn't follow this, right? It's very straightforward. But that's not all. Sometimes similar tracks laid around similar times contaminate our trail without us even knowing. And we also have animal tracks or more realistic prey animals that come through our environment that make easy tracks suddenly more challenging. And as time passes, our trail starts to fade and bigger, fresher tracks will often contaminate the area that we're in. But that's not all. We also have to keep in mind our environmentals. Maybe we have a busy road or a weird sound that occurs at just the wrong time. Maybe we have a little pond that turns into a water crossing that our dog also has to navigate. But that's not all. We also have to consider the way that we impact our dog. Maybe we have a really terrible start line or poor handling that interferes with the way our dog is moving. And we also have to consider wind, which will push odor away from where it's supposed to be. And suddenly you look at something like this and it's like, oh my gosh, how does my dog do this? They're so incredible that even though if you looked at this, you couldn't tell me where the trail is at all, the dog can still navigate really challenging environments. So I want to give you that visualizer so you can appreciate the magic that is the canine olfaction system and processing system that allows them to complete tasks like this that we truly do not understand nearly as much as we want to. The science of odor is still very new, and we lack a lot of understanding about how it moves, and we have to be able to trust our dog and shape their behavior while having a respect that they know more about what's going on than we do. So, having that tucked away in the corner of your mind, I just want to recap on how trailing is actually used. So, police and military, search and rescue, they frequently use trailing to find lost people or criminals. We also have what's called blood trailing. So if you shoot down a deer while you're hunting and it runs off, you can call in a blood trailing dog and they can follow that trail to source. I want you to understand that that's not what we're training our dogs to do here. First of all, we're not training them to trail animals at all, only people. And we are not training them with stakes, right? So we're not worried about truly finding lost people. We're not worried about volunteering with our local police department or search and rescue team. This is purely a recreational leisure activity. We are learning how to navigate the world with our dogs, and there are a lot of benefits there. First of all, anytime you train your dog, you're building a relationship of trust, and that's huge. But also, when you work anything that has to do with odor, you gain a respect for their understanding of the world and an awareness for the wild west of odor that we simply do not understand. You also gain an awareness and some skill building for yourself to read their body language, which is huge. Plus, trailing is a physical and mental activity, meaning they're going to go home tired, which is great. You're harnessing a skill that they already possess, it's genetically placed into them. And you're building a community of dog people who want to be outside, which is like kind of the best thing ever. So, trailing is extremely useful, even if you're not finding lost people. Um, Now, if you're interested in competing or titling, I want you to understand that man trailing as a sport is still very new to the world and to the US. It is more popular in Europe, but it is still very green here in the US. There are a few opportunities for titling. Georgia Canine, ARSA, and Man Trailing Global are all present in the US for sport titles. We do not currently have anything in the Midwest, although I am going to Florida in December to get my man trailing instructor certification, which will allow me to title sport dogs through Man Trailing Global here in Iowa, which is really exciting. Um, but I just want you to understand it's so new, which is really awesome that we get to be a part of something so new. It's just that if you're like ready to get titles, you're either going to have to drive or fly, or you might have to wait. um, okay, moving right along. We talked about understanding odor and how crucial that is to being a good teammate. Now let's talk about reading body language and actually look at some trails. So there are three main body language behaviors that I want you to be aware of. They're common trends. We also, of course, see tons of individualistic behavior that each dog will produce when they are trailing, and that's extremely important to understand as well, but that's not something I can teach you in this presentation. You're going to have to learn that by watching your dog on trails. So let's talk through these three. There are head turns, cutbacks, and flowing negatives. A head turn or a head snap or a head pop is when your dog is working a trail and they've got their consistent pace, they've got their consistent direction, and they're quite nicely working, and then they come up and acknowledge another odor and then go back to work and continue on. Now, this can be an indicator of two things. Either it's trash odor, distraction odor that they don't need to continue working. And typically that looks like a head come up. Maybe they linger on it for a little moment and then they come back and continue working. Or it can be an indicator that a turn is coming up, that the trail layer's odor is actually out there in that direction, and that soon we might be moving that way. And what I think I typically see more here is more frequent turns and a little bit more intense. So you're continuing on, it's like, oh, oh, oh. And then before you know it, you're turning and you're going that direction. So it's important to be able to tell the difference there on how your dog navigates head turns. We also have cutbacks. This is an elimination of direction. So let's say your dog is working well, but they've sort of come to an area where their odor is a little bit more spread and they're trying to figure out where the person has gone. This we frequently see at changes of direction and turns. So let's say our trail comes up and over. We might have our dog moving up and then eliminate this direction, come around, eliminate this direction, this direction, this direction, and then they continue on this way. That would be a really nice cutback where they've eliminated all of the directions over here and found the correct one. Then we have flowing negatives, and this is a little bit more subtle. It looks actually a lot like bracketing, which we see in air scenting, where the dog is working their trail, their scent cone, and they're coming up, hitting the edge of the scent cone, hitting the edge of the scent cone, hitting the edge of the scent cone, and continuing on moving forward. This is still an elimination of a direction. Oh, they did not go that way. They did not go that way. They did not go that way, but they're continuing on forward. So we're gonna watch a quick video from Smart Start Dog Training that has canine Betty, and she's doing some very extreme flowing negatives here, and also a few cutbacks and loops, and I'll point those out as we see them. Now, I'll be honest. I don't think we don't want to see flowing negatives quite this extreme. I think if they would just let her have a little bit more leash, they wouldn't get nearly as much of this, but that's okay. It does demonstrate the behavior. She's hitting the edge of the set cone. There's a nice cut back. Hitting the edge of the set cone, eliminating a direction, and continuing on forward. So, you kind of get the idea. Now, we're going to watch a video from Jeff Shetler working a dog on an urban trail. And if you're interested in more urban trailing, 2 Weeks to Operational Trailing by Jeff Shetler is a phenomenal book for progressions that way. So let's walk through this trail. Now, this dog has a really nice start to the trail. They're going to pick up the article here, quite literally, and begin the trail. They have a great, consistent pace and direction. And we see a couple of little head pops here and there, but overall, the dog is doing really, really nice work. Tail is flagged, head is going from up and down, so taking in some blown odor and some ground disturbance and crushed vegetation odor. And what you'll see when we get to this first concrete intersection is the dog is going to do a really nice head pop for trash odor. So take a look at this. And a great moving on, continuing on, no problem. And actually, on this intersection, the dog works beautifully. Doesn't acknowledge anything at all. So that looks great. Now, in a moment, we are going to see the dog switch from ground odor to air scenting. And they're going to take a turn into the parking lot. Nice. Totally. So a great little head turn indicating that turn was coming up, and then they continued on beautifully. Now the dog is air scenting, so the head comes up as opposed to working the ground because they're picking up this blown odor. The trail layer actually is on or had traveled on the left side of the parking lot along the grass, but the dog is working where the odor has been blown, which is much more efficient. They do check in with the actual physical track a couple of times, and I think you're going to see one here in a minute. They're going to walk over there. Yeah. And check in with that track. But the blown odor is over here in the parking lot. Now, also important to keep in mind, there's a lady by this car. So working a human distraction, the dog does beautiful. And they're about to check in with the track, but nice. A really good acknowledgement of where the person has gone. So now we're in our proximity alert. The dog's pace has picked up, head is coming up a little bit more, tail is still flagged, but we're moving much quicker. And the dog is going to come up here and start working source. And actually, this is kind of a fun one because the trail layer is up here on the stairs. So the dog actually has to work a little bit of a higher hide and try and locate the person. So you can see them working that scent cone. There it is. There they see him. They don't really want to go up the stairs, but they do get up there. Looks good. Nice job. Cool. Okay. So one more trail for you. And actually, I think that this is trailing versus tracking from Jeff Shetler. I actually think that this video, its audio describes it better than I would. So we're just going to listen to it.
Welcome to another GA Canine Training video, folks. And today we're featuring young Valiant working an urban track. And I kind of want to describe some of the things that are occurring here that really are a good description of the differences between tracking and trailing. So our trail layer actually went out on the grass here a little bit, then turned around and came back, and then actually started working along the curb line here. And you can watch how Valiant is working this odor, this scent picture. It's very strong on the more productive source, which is the vegetation, and on the edges and the barriers. Now, there is some on the ground as well, but it's not quite as strong. And this is what happens on sunny, warm days. That cement just not going to hold odor quite as well as the productive source next to it would be. So it's one of the differences in trailing and tracking is that a trailing dog is allowed to follow the odor wherever it might go. Now, with a human, we're dealing with several different types of odor. We have ground disturbance, we have contact odor. This is by the hands and the other body parts. And then we also have blown human odor, which is made up of gases and also skin cells. These things hit the ground and move with whatever environmental conditions might move them. So a trailing dog is going to be following all the different odors, going back and forth seamlessly from ground disturbance scent to blown human odor to contact odor. Whatever avails itself to the dog is what the dog will use. And this is a perfect example of that happening with Valiant. We're about to come up to an intersection here, and this is where we have wind blowing from the right to the left, and the track line is on the cement line. And what you're going to notice is Valiant hits this intersection and then goes very wide. This is because of the way the wind blows that human odor on the hard surface. It's very much like frost dust on a very, very cold road in the middle of a snowstorm. You can see how the snow has a tendency to drift along the highway. Well, the same thing happens with skin cells and the gases off-gassing from the human body. So with the wind, Valiant followed that scent to the left. And then here, our trail layer is also on the grass, and you can see how that wind-blown odor is pulling out into the alleyway and then onto the pavement. The track line is actually on the grass to the right, but look how she's working this. The scent picture is all the way up against the edge of the building here. She's obviously an odor, really, really working it quite well. Now she gets right on top of the track line that goes across the sidewalk, and we get into what we call the proximity alert. And with that proximity alert is a very large scent pool. The scent pool is getting bigger and bigger the longer somebody is in one place. And in this situation, the wind is slightly from the left to the right, going across the parking lot, and you can see how the dog works the edge of the scent pool until she hits the scent cone. The scent cone is coming right here, okay? So the predominant wind is creating the pool that's filling the parking lot. The dog works the edge of the pool until they get the scent cone, and that's how they get in. This is kind of the big difference between tracking and trailing. With trailing, the dog is allowed to follow any type of odor that presents itself and is not having to stay right on top of that track line. Because in the natural world, in particular in an urban environment, that track line simply disappears quite a bit, especially on hard surfaces and bad conditions.
Yeah. So some really nice work there.
Welcome to another GA Canine Training.
All right. So, in terms of how we train our dogs to trail, there are three main phases, three main progressions. And we actually go back and forth through them quite a bit, but we use them for different things. So, fire trails or hot trails are all about building motivation. And in a lot of ways, it's actually not even about asking your dog to sniff as much as it is helping them understand we want you to get to source. There's really good things when you get there, and we want you to do it quickly and efficiently. So, this, in many ways, is the true reward for a lot of dogs, and that's how we use it to get our dogs excited about navigating new and challenging tasks. So, in a hot trail or a fire trail, we have our trail layer or trail runner who has a super high value reward, teasing up the dog, getting him really excited, and then they're going to drop a scented article that smells like them on the ground and run off to their hiding spot. And while they're running, the dog is watching and they're sitting there and they're getting really excited. And then they get let go and they get to go and chase that person down and get to them. And then they get their big reward. Then we move on to warm trails. And this is really where we start asking the dog to slow down just a little bit so that they can actually sniff and do the work. This is our transition phase into cold trails. And what this looks like is the runner is still going to tease up the dog and run off and drop their article. But then rather than having the dog sit there and watch to see exactly where they went, we actually move the dog away. So we might take him for a walk, we might put him up in the car, but then we're going to bring him back out, check the article, and run the trail. And what we typically see is that the dog might run to like where they last saw the person, but then they choose to use their nose and start working, and that's how we get that transition in. Then we move to cold trails. So this is sort of the maintenance phase. This is the goal. Is there's no tease, no visual clues. The dog just locates the article and runs the trail. Now, we use fire trails to help us get to the other things we're going to work. So, distance and duration. I suppose we don't use fire trails for this one, but maybe more so for the second two. In distance and duration, we're working age, that time element of odor environmentals. So, there's a big difference, like we talked about, between a 10-minute old trail and a 4-hour old trail. We want to be able to work both, and we also want to work further distance. So we're working age. Then we have distractions, contamination, urban settings, new contexts, challenging environmentals, loud people, food, that kind of stuff. And then we're also going to work obstacles, water crossings, fencings, indoor thresholds, coming inside, that kind of stuff. We might very well use fire trails for to get the dog excited and understanding it's the same game, just a new context. Now, when we do our actual workshop in July, we're going to work through fire trails and introduce articles and some basic problem solving. And I want to watch a quick video on fire trails, another one from Jeff Shetler.
That's the way. Whoa, what is he doing? Drop it. Okay. Keep him focused. There you go. Let him go forward just a little bit. There you go, just like that. Good. Good. Oh, where's he going? Let him move forward. Guide him to it. And now. Did you see all that?
So it's all about building motivation and getting the dog excited for working and getting all the way to source. Now, obviously, we're not going to let our dogs off leash when we do fire trails unless we have a really young puppy that we know isn't going anywhere. But still very helpful. Now, on this slide, I have some other resources for you. These are just some great articles and videos that I used to put together this presentation. All of this stuff is actually in our Google Drive, so you can take a look at that other resources document that's in there for any reference to that. But thank you. I am so glad that you are a part of our community and glad that you are interested in learning about trailing. It's like one of my favorite things, and I'm glad I get to share it with you. So thank you for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and happy training. Have a great week.